Now let's talk about choosing the right channel. So there are so many communication channels, and it can be challenging trying to pick the right communication channel. Some examples of communication channels, and some of these we've kind of mentioned, like memos, reports. You may deliver your message via email or text or voicemail, telephone conversation, even video conferencing or a Zoom session. Maybe an instructor holds a Zoom session to talk about what's on a test. That would be an example. In-person presentation, and then a face-to-face meeting. Those are all communication channels. Other communication channels are, you could think about Facebook, Facebook Live, WebEx, instant messaging. So it's important to understand that there are so many ways to communicate. Other ways that are television, radio, newspaper, magazine, those are also communication channels. So let's talk about these channels and the richness of these channels. There's also a page in your book that I want to show you. Texting would be very low, and then very high would be face-to-face. So this is kind of a range here. But I wanted to show you in your book, I really like this exhibit. So I really like this exhibit in the book. It lists the communication channel, the channel richness, and when should you use this channel. So this is a good guide to help you when you're trying to deliver a message. Well, texting is very low. When are you going to use it? When your content is uncontroversial, when you want a quick response. So I'll just send a quick text and see what's going on. Like if I want to check on a student and just, hey, you haven't done your work for this week, I may text or send a Canvas message. That is when the channel richness is very low and you just need to get the message delivered quickly. Then you have memos and reports, and this is very low because the audience can't see you or hear you. And this is just when you have content that needs to be delivered that's not controversial, or if you need to communicate lengthy or detailed information. Then you have email. And this is still very low because they can't hear or see you. And this is, when you're delivering a message and you need to reach a lot of people, this is a good way to contact them. Then you have voicemail. It's still low. It's not very low because they can hear you. Still, you would use this when your content is not controversial. And then if you don't need a record of your message, then you could use voicemail, but remember it can be saved by the listener. Telephone conversation. Now you have moderate because they can hear your tone and they can see how it changes through the call. And this is still when you're trying to get a response quickly, but if your content is more personal, you definitely want to pick up the phone and call, or if you need to talk to someone quickly. Video conferencing, now we're moving into high because they can see you and they can hear you. And this is a good way, and this is what we do a lot with online classes. And we use Zoom. If a student needs help, we can Zoom. And if you have your camera on, this is going to be high. Now, if you don't have your camera on, it's kind of like a telephone conversation. In-person presentation, of course, this is high because you're reaching a large audience and they can see and hear you. And you want to be in person if you're delivering an important message. And then a face-to-face meeting would be very high. Your audience is going to be right in front of you, and it's more personable. And you want to use this when it's high priority or it's a complex topic and you need instant feedback. You definitely want a face-to-face meeting. I wanted to go over this because I think that this is extremely important, that you know when you work in business what communication channel to use. It's important that you choose the appropriate communication channel. Video conferencing has become very popular or used a lot because of COVID, and we have had to get comfortable communicating this way. And I will say the first couple of times you kind of feel awkward. It's something different, but you do get used to it. And it is a great way to communicate, especially in online classes or where you're not able to be in the same room. But here's some best practices. Because we're using this more, there needed to be some best practices set. So remember this: when you're Zooming or using any kind of video conference, dress as you would if you were right in front of them in a meeting. Keep your video camera on. This is extremely important when you're meeting and it's with your company or you're having a meeting. You want to keep your camera on. When you're not speaking, make sure your audio is muted so the noise doesn't interfere with who's speaking. When you get ready to speak, you can turn it on. Use distraction-free backgrounds, no filters or frames, or try to just get in an office type setting as your background. Keep your eyes on the camera. Make sure you're visible. Make sure it's not too dark. Listen to your speaker. Try not to multitask. This is my weakness right here. Wear office attire. No pajamas. Make sure you dress the part, even if you are at home. And always remember, the first priority is to communicate your message. So you really need to keep your audience at the top priority. I think as speakers, sometimes we focus so much on what we're going to say, we completely forget about the audience. So making the audience a top priority should be your top priority. So when you're making your speech, don't think about yourself. I know it's easy to practice and think about how we're saying it, but make sure your focus is on your audience. And this is something that I think we all can work on. Now we're going to talk about picking the right words when we're delivering a message. And this little question here is funny. It's all about wording. Is that car pre-loved or just plain used? See how the wording is different there? Here are some factors for consideration. You want to consider your audience expectations. Is your audience made up of colleagues, and do they prefer formal language? This is important to consider. You also want to consider their education. Make sure your wording's going to change based on the education level. You will have to really consider your words based on that. And then profession. Be careful here because we often have a tendency to use jargon. And jargon is basically the official language of a career field. So we have to realize that one set of words may be good for this audience, but it may not be used for another audience. An example is military. Military have a lot of acronyms. So one of them is KP, which is Kitchen Patrol, or SAM, Surface to Air Missile. So you're not going to use these acronyms if you're not speaking to the military, if you have a non-military audience. They're not going to understand that. You want to be concise, short and to the point. Say what you mean what you say. Also, you want to avoid slang. You don't want to get so comfortable that you're using slang because these words may not be understood by your audience, and this will avoid misunderstandings. You want to avoid bias. This is a preconception about a group, a particular group. So you have gender bias. This is stereotypical attitudes toward a specific gender. So if you're just saying that you're just including guys, maybe you're doing a speech about fitness, and you're talking to the guys because you assume that the guys work out and not the girls, that would be gender bias. Age bias. And then you have race, ethnicity, and nationality bias. So these are assumptions about a specific group of people, their attitudes, opinions, and experiences. So you definitely want to avoid bias as a speaker. Make sure you make everyone comfortable when you're speaking and include these. Also, you want to pick the right words. And this is something that I think we all can work on, even in writing, active voice and passive voice. So, active voice is going to facilitate direct, powerful, and concise communication. And it's used when the subject of the sentence is doing the action. And then using an active voice shows accountability that creates a deeper trust between the speaker and the audience. For example, here, the accountant did the taxes. The active voice works better for most business communication. So this is what you want to use when you're communicating. Passive voice is used when the subject of the sentence is not doing the action. The taxes were done by our accountant. So it's not as effective in business communication. So remember, use active voice.